Thank you for joining me in part 3 of the Daler-Rowney water mixable oil painting course. So today we're going to do a grisaille and glazing painting. So it's actually a two-part process. So in case you don't know what grisaille and glazing is, it's when you take a painting and you first paint it in monochrome. Then you leave it to dry, then you come back and you glaze over the colors. So the grisaille is the monochrome layer. So traditionally you just use a grey or a black and white which you paint, but there's no rule that tells you that you have to use a black and white. Having said that, today I am going to be doing black and white. Alright, so we're going to be painting a beautiful zebra. Let me show you what it looks like and then we'll take it from there. So this is the zebra we're going to be painting today. I found a photograph on Pixabay, so it's a really lovely photo, but obviously it's a general wildlife photograph. And so, which means the first thing is the proportions of the photograph isn't the same as our canvas, because today we're painting on a 16 by 20 inch canvas. So if you're using the metric system, that's roughly 510 millimeters by 405 millimeters. So we're going to have to crop it out, some of that extra grasses and stuff, because we want the zebra to be the star of the show. And then obviously we need to crop to get the proportions right. So what we're going to do today is we're going to crop out all that excess around there. So we'll sort of zoom in a little bit on the zebra face, and that's going to make the zebra the star of the show. Now what you will notice that I have done is I've given myself just a little bit of looking room here on the front of the zebra's face. The reason I've done that is if we had to crop this guy over here so that it's the zebra fully fills the frame, so we've got a little bit more of his body in the back, it'll feel as though the zebra is staring into the edge of the canvas, and we don't want that. We want him looking into the distance, and it's that little bit of looking room that we add, which gives us that effect. So in the end of the day, that's what we're left with, and I think that's it. We've got a nice composition there, and it should give us a lovely painting. So let me go over to the canvas and I'll show you what I've done there. In your notes, you'll see I have given you a tiled printout, which you can use to redraw your zebra if you want to. And obviously there's also just the standard photo if you prefer just drawing by hand or using the grid method. It's entirely up to you how you draw it. What is important is what you draw. So what I have drawn here is obviously just the outline all the way around the zebra, and then I've drawn the outlines of each of these of his stripes, of his pajama stripes. So let me know where to put that in. I've drawn around the eye, got as much little details and things in there, because obviously the eye is the most important thing, that's the focal point. And here I've just given where's the top and the bottom jaw end, and a few little lines here around the mouth. And then can you see here, and here's two different tonal values and two different color changes. So I've just given myself an idea of where that ends over there, although it's not critical. And then here I've just added a few little lines doing this, just so I know where does that end over there. And I've given myself a little dashed line over there so that I know where the body ends and the hairs start. And that's literally all the drawing work that I've done. So there you may or may not be able to see it. It seems like you could see a few of the lines. So that's the big trick when you're painting a zebra like this, is you need to keep your wits about you, which is the black bits, which is the white bits. Okay, so how are we going to do this? If we had to do this in two different sessions, because now we need to do a grisaille layer, which is the black and white, and then we need to do the color layer, which is the glazing. So obviously here we're going to paint all the black now, all these lovely black stripes, and then we'll come back in and we're going to glaze all these shadings and colors into the zebra. So by the time we're done today, we should have basically a fully black and white, or a black and white zebra. I'm not going to paint any of the background because I want this guy to be just a little bit modern. So we're going to jazz up some of these colors in the glazing process. So I think that'll be quite fun, and it'll make it look just a touch more arty. So let's head over to the palette and I'll show you how I mix up this grisaille color. So the easiest way of doing that is I'm going to take some French ultramarine. I'll pop that down. So this is the Georgian water mixable oils from Daler-Rowney. So I'll put out an amount of French ultramarine, and then I'll put out an amount of raw umber, and I want them roughly the same amount because we're going to mix them in together 50-50, and that gives us a nice neutral grey. It's a real quick way of mixing up a neutral black or a grey. It's a very, very dark colour. I like to call it black enough, because if I do that and you look over there, you can see it's not perfectly black. It's still got a bit of colour to it. And now obviously you can always tint it from here into any direction. Do you want it a little bit a browner black, a bluer black, or I could even bring some other colours in to make it a greeny black or a yellowy black, a reddish black. But mixing it 50-50 gives you a perfect, as far as I'm concerned, a perfect mid-tone. Right, so from here, that's what we're going to be painting with. So you're not really allowed to, technically, you're not really allowed to mix this, but I found that you sometimes you do need to just add a little bit of white here and there to get the right tonal value. But we're going to try not to. All right, just to stick to the purest form today. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of the Simply Simmons bristle brushes. So it's a full bit shaped bristle brush. I think that should work fine. If you've got the standard bristle brushes, you're welcome to use them. For the effect on the zebra, I find that try to rather use a bright, full bit shaped brush, simply because you don't want the hairs too long. If I take a look at even this guy over here, his hairs are quite long, and which makes it a little bit floppy, and then you don't get quite as good effect. For example, I think here's a better example. If I take this guy over here, can you see how long his hairs are? And that makes the hairs really, really floppy. And that doesn't give us quite as good effect as what we want with the zebra, because he's got those little short hairs and things that we want to get that effect in. So that's why I say rather a bright means the shape of the hair over here is square, like, let's say for example, there's your brush, and here's the hair. The hairs form a square, so that's a bright. And the full bit is when it does that kind of a shape. Can you see that? It's got that rounded tip, and there's the brush. So that's a full bit, and that's a bright, and then there's your regular brush is more of a rectangle shape. So we don't want the rectangle shape today. Alright, so for the most part, I'm going to be using this paint as is, because it's lovely creamy, so I'm going to use it as is. Pick up some paint on the brush, load it up so that it's nice and fully loaded inside the brush bristles, but there's not too much excess paint. For example, I'm not picking up the paint like this so that there's a, can you see that there's a big blob there? We don't want that. It must just be loaded. But if I hold that there, can you see there's no excess paint? It's all inside the bristles. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go all along inside these guys, and I'm mostly going to fill it up. Here the hair is super short. Over there the hair is a little bit longer, so there we'll add a really nice hair effect. And then over here you'll also see that there's little places where there's a bit of a hair effect. However, having said that, if you look really carefully at areas like this, because you've got white hair and you've got black hair, so there are places where the white and the black hair overlap each other. Let's take a look at this area over here on the photograph. Okay, so I've zoomed way in. Can you see it's really short hair, but you've got that little bit of a fuzziness or that overlap where the black hair and the white hair meet. Now let's go a little bit further up where we've got longer hair. So can you see over there? There we've got a definite overlapping. So there's no way we can do that just with grey or our grisaille color. To get that, we're going to have to overlap it with white. Do you agree with me? So there are just those few times when we're going to have to do some overlapping. So let's do it. So what I'll usually do with something like this, because as you can see you've got white canvas and then just lines, so it becomes quite difficult for you to see what goes where. So the easiest place is I'm going to start here by the nose and just very lightly give myself that outline, because that whole outline is, for all intents and purposes for now, it's black. At the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to see or get myself started. And then if I can see a distinct, make out any distinct stripes, then I can paint them in as well. There I can see is a stripe. I can see this dark area around the eye. Now always remember, if I'm using a specific brush, it doesn't mean you need to use that same brush. You must use the brush that's most comfortable for you. For example, around here, if that's easier for you to use a fine liner, then do it. And you'll also find if it's easier for you to have thinner paint, then thin your paint using water. Now, because we're leaving the background white, it's really important that you're super careful around the edges to not get any darks. Okay, let's edge off this nose as well, as we can see where that is. Now, if you look on the photo, you'll notice that the edge of the nose doesn't stop in a perfect line. It is a little bit fuzzy where the black hair stops and the white hair starts. So that's okay. Don't bother too much about getting a perfect edge. Now you'll also notice that for now I'm staying zoomed out. I'm not zooming in. I don't want you to see any detail that I'm painting. I want you to see that overall impression, because that's what we're painting now. We're painting the overall impression because we want to just see where we are, get a feel for what goes where. Okay, here on this edge over here, I'm going to also see where can I see little dark. We can have a thin little dark lines over here on the forehead. That's going to help you just define the edge of the face. And I'm also going to just strategically add a little thin line over here. Any thin lines that are going to help me define the edge and the shape of our zebra. Once you've got that, now suddenly you're starting to see and recognize things. Now that I've got those one or two very easy to spot lines in, now I can start to make out heads of tails from all this other multitude of lines that are going on there, because generally now you've got in between two lines are going to be black and the next two lines is going to be white. So I'm going to just continue at a wide angle for a short while, just so that I can make sure that I know you're seeing what I'm seeing, because obviously I can see the lines on my canvas, which you can't. So you go ahead and do the same. Get as many of these lines in as what you can that are blatantly obvious, that are not difficult for you to see. If you've got a doubt whether it's black or white, then rather stop and go to another area that you can definitely recognize that it's black and get it blocked in. And like I say, I'm working with this brush here, but if you need to get like here in these corners and things, if you need to go over to a smaller brush, then do that. Now I'm not adding a thicker layer of paint. It's really just a plain layer of paint. Thin, thin, thin. There's no height to the paint. And as you're painting these lines, also realize that each zebra is unique. And it's these stripes that make him unique. So if your stripes don't fit in and look exactly like the photograph, if you've gone over the line or so on, that doesn't matter. Absolutely doesn't matter. So far it's going nice and quick, eh? And we're starting to, now that we've just got a few lines, can you start to see the zebra now? Now it's starting to make sense. And that's what you're looking for. You need it to start just making sense. So that if you stand back, you can recognize that it's a zebra. So the minute you've got that, then it's easy for you to, from there, go ahead and start adding details, and it becomes easier to see which lines are what color. Alright, so let me zoom in for a minute, so that you can see how I'm painting. What does the actual paint on the canvas look like? Can you see? I've got little areas there that are not even solid lines. They're sort of just broken up. and there's absolutely no layer, no thickness to that paint. It's not gobs of paint. If I show you my palette as well, let's go there for a minute. The only place I've touched is here, and look how I'm picking up. I'm sort of just rubbing my brush in that. I'm not scooping it like you would expect. Just loading up the brush again like this on both sides. So there are some really skinny little lines. Feel free to use a fine liner. When doing yours. And also, if necessary, to thin your paint. So you'll also see that these lines aren't perfectly thick. They're thicker and thinner and so on. And that's why I like using the full bit brush, because he's flat on this side, he's broad over there. I can draw a line. Let me just load it up with paint, a little bit of paint on each side. So as I come down here like this, I can press harder and softer to get different thickness lines like that. See that? So that makes it really easy. It's hard, and I'm pressing softer and softer, and that makes me able to end it in a nice little sharp point. Okay, so if in doubt with a line, if it's black or white, skip it. You can always come back to it. Alright, so now I need to zoom out again, because I need to show you here on the forehead what's going on. Can you see that over here? All these lines from along the bridge of the nose, from the side of the face, and the other side of the face are all meeting each other here in a little bit of almost a bit of a diamond shape. So there's here heaps of thin little lines that eventually meet each other. So yeah, it's quite possible that you'll lose what goes where, as long as they sort of form in that V shape over here. Yeah, for away. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and complete those lines over there, but I'm going to stop right here where the main starts. In other words, with these guys over here, I'm going to go all the way to there, where I've added that little dotted line where the neck starts, stops, and the main starts. So all the way along here, I'm going to stop. just in a line there for now. Then I'll come back and we'll do that bit together. So you do the same. Go ahead and finish the lines on the neck. I must say that I'm getting really beautiful coverage of the paint as I lay it down. I find that often with the oil paints, some brands, as you lay it down, especially with a dark color over a raw canvas like this, you tend to get stripy effect that you have to leave this guy to dry and then give him a second coat to get rid of that stripiness. And I'm not getting that here. I've got a beautiful coverage once off a single layer. So I'm super impressed because I've painted as little paint on the canvas as what I can get away with. There's literally zero. If I had to look at this from the side, it's flat, 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 like a sheet of paper. The reason why I've painted so thin is because I don't want thick paint because it's going to take ages to dry. I want to paint as thin as possible so that it can dry quickly, then I can carry on painting the glazing layer quickly. So that's why I don't use lots of paint when I'm doing the grisaille layer. So with the mane, you can see that you've got the black hair and you've got the white hair overlapping each other quite a bit. So our first mission is just to get that black hair effect, and then we'll come back in and do the white hair effect. So you're going to pick your paint up by picking up on this side of the brush, turning it around and pick it up on that side of the brush. So let's assume that this here is my palette. So I'm going to pick up paint by rubbing it flat on there, turn it 180, flat over there, and look what happens. You get this beautiful sharp chisel point. And that's what's going to give us the ability to paint a hair effect. To get the hair effect itself, we're going to use a flicking motion. So now it's really important that you flick in the correct direction. See there? In that direction. But now as we come around the top of the head, we're going to gradually start changing that direction. So just look out for that. So start here at the bottom and flick upwards. And this is quite rough. You can do it quite quickly. And you're going to do a few little flicks like this and then pick up new paint. Do a few flicks, pick up new paint. Now what you want is to get a bit of a roughness on these edges over here. You don't want them to be perfect. In other words, you're going to have some of the black hairs that are going into the white, and then we're going to come back with white hairs and going into the black. So I will tend to, as I'm working along that length over there, here I'm going to tend to work a little bit out in that direction. Can you see that? And here I'm going to work a little bit out in that direction, to make sure that I'm getting a little bit of a jagged edge. And then when I get to the end, you can just add flicks, just like that. Even here by the white, add a few little flicks, because it all ends in black. So that you rather go a little bit too far into the white than a little bit too little. So a nice little edge there. Can you see that beautiful hair effect you're already getting? Okay, so let's continue with that. Alrighty, so here we're starting to head towards some nice changes of direction. So you have to really look carefully at these directions. Okay, so over here, we don't really have stripes anymore, right? So we're going to have to work almost, you can think of it as in reverse. We're going to start at the flicking outwards to get the edge of the hair. You see that? Nice light loose little flicks. Making sure I'm getting my directions right. Like that. And now we need to paint negatively. We want to show that those hairs are behind the white hairs. So now we're going to, from here, flick downwards. Nice, beautiful, and loose. So that's creating us now that effect of the white hair. Outwards to get the top of the black hair, downwards to get the top of the white hair. And you're going to do that now all the way down, all the way down is mane. So sometimes you can have short little flicks, sometimes you can have nice long flicks, so maybe there's a big gap between the white hair over there. And here on the edges too, you can flick a little bit inwards as well, like that, a little bit inwards. That also helps to show you that loose little white hair effect. See that? Beautiful. And easy, eh? It's really easy. So cool when you know a few little tricks, these little secrets. Okay, now let's just add here and there, very lightly, just the odd flick or two inside the white, but don't overdo it. So otherwise it's going to go dark. You've got to be really just gentle with that. And that just makes it look like you've got a few little places where the white hair is split, and you can see it quite nicely in a few places on the photograph. I think it's around here. Let's see if we can do that. So add an extra little solid flick over there. So the white hair is split into two little, what would you call it? Sections, compartments. I don't know. You tell me. Okay, so now we're going to just go around the ear, because here it's all dark, but there is a little area of white over there. But for now, ignore the ear. So I'm working as carefully as I can right up against the ear. Here I can see that ear is quite dark in that area. So I'm going to add myself just a tiniest little amount of edging over there, just to show where the ear stops. And that's really important. Just keep looking at these directions of these hairs. So all I'm concentrating on is getting that outside edge right. loose little flicks. Okay, over there we've got some light. So we're going to flick inwards. Now can you see I've started way too far? Sort of there's the edge of the ear over there. So I've started way too far. I'm flicking in. Like that. And now here I can also see some of these flicks are in this direction. In other words, I've got some hairs running in that direction as well. So you've got overlapping flicks. Some are coming down and some are going that way. There we've got the ear, so there and here by this ear we've got a bit of shading going on there. So let's convert all this to black and white to see what needs to be done. So now you're going to take, without cleaning the brush, just wipe it off. Just get rid of all that excess. All we want is just a little bit of paint on it, like that. And I will add just this little bit of shading here with that excess paint. Now, can you see how little paint it is? Like that. There's a bit of a shading coming down there like that. Okay, and now let's take a look here. Inside the ear, in that area there is quite dark, so let's pick up a little bit of paint. Just put a little bit of dark down there. And then from there, everything else is all just flicks and things. Because you've got all these hairs. So let's pick up, load up with some paint again. And now look really carefully to see these directions. They start sort of horizontal and then they curve down that way over here. Now I cannot explain to you how light a touch I'm using. I'm literally just touching the canvas with the tip of the bristles, tip of the longest bristles. Over here there's a few little odd rabs and dabs as well, and they seem to be coming along. These white hairs are running along in this direction. And then on the edge of this ear, it's got that little dark line that starts off quite broad. So I'm pressing hard, softer, softer, until he disappears on me. Yeah, it's just a few little random marks and things, all using flicks. So I'm just looking at hair directions. In other words, I'm just making marks. I'm really not trying to get individual hairs or anything like that. The only place I'm getting individual hairs is in this area here. Other than that, it's just tonal value changes in a bit of a stripy direction. So I've got it a little bit darker over here, really dark over there. These are just marks and things that are going to create that feeling that we have. Alright, let's see, it's dark over there. And let's do the same thing with this back ear. It's got a nice little dark patch on the top of the ear over there. Just disappears off over that direction. And it seems to also just run along down there. Like that. And then here on the inside, let's get rid of that excess paint of the brush. And all these hairs seem to be running just like this. Can you make out details in the ear? No, not really, eh? So don't try and put it in. All we want to do is just get a bit of a stripy effect. Flicks over there, and then here I can see there's a super thin little edge. Running down his ear there like that, which then disappears. Okay, now let's get our black here that's overlapping this ear. So that's coming up like this. Some lovely ones curling out, gradually going straight like that. Those guys seem to be going a little bit higher up over there. And with that, I think we're pretty much good to go. On the ear and the mane. So you know what? We are nearly done. So let's go down and tackle the eye. So for this, I'm going to use a smaller brush. So I'm going to use a Robert Simmons Signet range. And this is a number 3, and it's a round brush. Can you see what it looks like? Nice little, so it's still a bristle brush, still quite stiff ears. And I'm going to just pick up the tiniest amount of paint. Let me show you on the palette. Just these little odd bits of paint that are lying around here. I'm just going to rub the brush in that. In other words, what I'm trying to do is pick up just a tiny little bit of paint. When I'm doing these shadings over here, so I'm going to start in the darker area, and that way it allows me to judge how much paint or how dark the paint that's on the brush is going to come out. That'll allow you to judge whether you need to pick up more paint or clean your brush a little bit more to get less paint. Once you've got a feel for how little paint you need to get a certain tonal value, then you can go ahead and add these lighter guys in. And now, like I said, don't be shy to, if we do need to, use a little bit of white paint. Am I going to get my eye 100% correct? as close as I can, but it doesn't need to be 100%. You always got little differences. What I'm interested in getting right is tonal values. Right, so let's see here, underneath the eye we've also got this little line going over there, and here seems to be just dabs and dashes and things, because it's not quite solid. There's a bit of a solid line at the bottom. But everything from there just seems to be dabs and dashes, sort of a mottled effect. So I'm just going to tap, tap, tap. Until the effect seems similar. There's a little line. There's a little line somewhere around there. There seems to be an edge over there. All this here is lovely dark, all the way around the eye. Okay, so now I'm going to just clean my brush just on my roll of kitchen towel. Just get rid of the excess, and I am going to squeeze out just a tiny dot of white, because now we need to add that lovely little glint and highlight on the eye. So this is those times when you have no choice. You have to use a little bit of white, because you're simply not going to get the effect by using purely your grey or your grisaille or dead layer color. So I am now using a soft fine liner. Let's add that highlight on over there. I can see there's a secondary highlight over there. Not quite as bright, and it seems like there's a little one over there. Perfectly white over there. Yeah, that's great. Great, so I'm going to go back to my original bristle full bit brush, and let's take a look. Here on the nose, the bridge of the nose over there is lovely dark, all the way around here, it's all lovely dark. So pretty much blocking it in around there, and around here by the noses, by the nostril as well. There it goes lighter. Here on the bottom of the mouth, you've got really dark. So get a really dark line over there, and get the top of that line nice and sharp. In other words, you want a gap like that. Can you see over here? My one hand is casting a shadow on the one below it. The same thing is happening over here. See there on the photograph? You'll see that this top lip is casting a shadow on the bottom lip. So we're going to put that down over there. Wipe off all that excess paint that's now on that brush. And then we're going to use that to block in the rest, like that. So be careful not to lose that dark edge on the bottom, but if you do, pick up more paint and just re-establish it. Okay, let's see, we seem to have a little bit of dark over there as well, and here on that bottom edge. So it goes dark, a little bit lighter, and then dark again, like that. Here inside the nostril is going to be really dark, because what happens is the light can't get in there. So it's really dark over there, and then from there it fades lighter again. So now it's back to getting rid of that excess on the brush and fade him out. Okay, so here on the tip of the nose, we don't have as much paint, so I'm using a brush that's got almost no paint on it. If you do need paint, just pick up the tiniest amount. See what I'm doing there? Just picking up just the tiniest amount of paint that's lying around. And I'll even rub most of it off on the palette again. Super light touch. Okay, now notice, when I come here to dark areas, I'm just not touching that dark. As if I do, I'm going to be picking up paint, right? Some of that dark paint, and then it's going to be spreading. And I don't want it to do that unless I'm ready for it to spread. So what's nice about the Daler-Rowney canvases is that the weave of the canvas is not so rough. You'll find that a lot of the canvases, the weave is quite rough. So with them, you have to really scrub to get in there. Here, I'm still able to use a nice feather-like touch. Right, so once I've got that, and I'm happy with that tonal value over there, now it's just a case of getting these guys to match. So I'm now going to pick up a little bit more paint on the brush, and I'm going to be using just a random tapping motion. Now look what I'm doing. Can you see that I'm turning my brush in my hand as I'm doing that? And that's the way I'm making sure that I'm getting marks here on these edges, but none of these marks are forming a pattern. We don't want any funny repetitive patterns like parallel lines and stuff. That's going to look really odd. Let's see. Here as well. So this is just where the dark sort of ends. If necessary, come back, establish that nice dark line over there. We've got to get that a nice sharp edge over there. Really important in order to show the top and the bottom lip separate. Let's see over here, we can add a little bit more paint. Area there as well. Some more taps over here. Alright, so here we've just got a really basic shading, so I'm going to just gently soften that edge up over there. Just gently rub over it. Here, this edge over there is lighter than the rest, so I'm going to make sure there's no paint on my brush. Gently rub it. Got a little bit too dark, so I'm now going to pick up just a little bit of white. Tap on that edge, so it's not a hard line. Tapping on the edge just to soften it. Give it a ever so slight shading. Okay, let's pick up some black paint again and make sure that this here is a nice sharp edge. Even if you need to use a fine liner, make sure you get that edge there nice and dark and nice and sharp, because you want to show that there's distance between this edge of the nostril and that inside bit, because though they're not touching each other, they a little bit further apart. If you see it from the side, you've got that kind of a distance between him and him. And the way to show that is to get a nice contrast between the two and a sharp line. Alright, if I look at it, everything there seems to be quite nice. I'm happy with that. There's a few little loose hairs coming out over there, but that's detail work that we'll do later. Okay, it's looking pretty good. So now you'll notice that over here there's no shadings or anything like that, but that's fine. That we're all going to bring in with the glazing effect. One place where we can add a little bit detail though is over there. We can add just a few little lines using some white paint. So for that I'm going to use the Simply Cement round. It's a soft round brush. Can you see that? Small little point. So that's a number 4. And just some neat white paint out of the tube. No thinning down or nothing. And all we're looking for there is just to get a little bit of a hair effect. So all you're going to do is use these guys here as a guide. And just extend a few of these guys into nice little sharp points, that's all. And that's going to give you that lovely, super detailed look on the hair when we haven't actually painted any details. Can you see how quick it's going? And not every hair, just here and there, just enough to suggest some detail. If you find that the paint on your brush is now starting to become dirty, grey, because obviously all this paint over here is all wet, and just give your brush a quick little wash. But please don't go overboard and add too much detail. We don't want to paint every hair. What we do want to paint is just an impression of the hair. So a few little flicks here and there is more than enough to create that impression. You see that? More than enough. Going to add a few little black ones in as well, coming down. Just so that you've got some really sharp little edges with the black as well. And here in on the inside you can have the odd little, just that impression that there's little gaps in between the hairs, and you then seeing the black hairs behind it just shining through. Aren't you relieved that you didn't have to paint every hair? So that was it. It was just 2 minutes of fiddling. Alrighty, so we now need to leave this guy to dry. So we'll leave him for a few days to dry. Make sure that when you touch it, it's not sticky anymore. You must be able to touch it without the paint coming off on your hands. Then you know you're good enough to go. So I'll see you then. Welcome back to the grisaille and glazing class. It's taken about 2 weeks for my grisaille layer to dry. So now we can go ahead and do the glazing. So there are a few little things that we need to do it correctly so that we don't pick up problems a little bit further down the line. But what I want to do is let's first go and take a look and see what are we going to do, and then we'll see how to do it. So this is our zebra that we're working from. Now, as you can see, he hasn't got too many colors in him, black and white and a few little shadowy colors. And what I want us to do is add a little bit more color to him to make him a bit more lively and vibrant. So to do that, we need to use some more vibrant colors. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to exaggerate the intensity of the colors. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the saturation and I'm going to push it just way up like that. So can you see what's happening? You've got all these underlying colors that are inside the zebra are intensifying. So now needless to say, we're not doing a background. So what we're going to do is just intensify the colors in the zebra itself, and then we end up with that. So he's not going to look like a Christmas tree, but he's going to look nice, just extra color and give him that extra vibrancy. So I think it's going to look quite pretty. The reason why I'm doing this is it's going to allow us to add not just one color to add a little shadow in there, it's going to allow us to add a few colors to play around with the glazing a little bit. The principle behind grisaille and glazing is that you've got your grisaille layer which is dry, and then you're adding color glazes over it to add the color and the dimension and life to that picture, right? Now, because we're working in oils, we need to be careful that we stick to the fat over lean principle. So we've got to add more oil in subsequent layers. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use a specific amount of water, and then we're going to add a specific amount of oil to it. So that if we have to let this glazing layer dry and we add a next glazing layer over it, we've got that measurement that we can use to subsequently add more and more oil to those subsequent layers. So let me show you how I do that. So I'll take a glass jar like this, a transparent one that I can measure my heights and see how much liquid I've got inside. So I'm going to add water to it. Now, when I'm doing the glazing layer, I'm going to have 2 containers with water. This guy here is for washing my brush. This guy here is for thinning down the paints to get the correct amount of pigment in the glazing. So what I'll do is I don't need to add tons and tons and tons of water, because you're only going to add a certain amount for the glazes. You do need obviously lots more water for washing your brush, eh? So I'm going to add some water there, and then I'll just mark it. Like that. So now I can see where my layer is, and I'm always going to, generally when I'm doing glazes, I'm going to fill it up to that mark over there. Then I'm going to take my oil. Now always remember, this has to be the water mixable oil. And now I've got a dropper, and I'm going to fill this dropper up to a certain point. So in this case, I'm going to this is my first layer, so I'm going to make it up to the mine is marked in millimeters. So I'm going to fill it up here to the 1 millimeter mark. So now I've got 1 milliliter of oil, which I'm adding to the water. And now you can take a stick or a brush and just give him a swizzle, a nice little mix. And because it's mixed, now every time I dip my brush in there to load it up with some water, it's automatically getting a certain amount of oil with it. And that, I know that's extra oil that wasn't in my original grisaille layer, because my grisaille layer, I had no oil. So now don't worry about that milkiness, it's normal. It won't affect your actual paint color once you've mixed it into the paint. Alright, so let's take a look. What kind of colors do we see there inside that zebra now that we've intensified its colors? I'm seeing possibly a little bit of cadmium yellow, maybe some yellow ochre there by the ears and by the mane. The bottom of the neck, it almost seems like a little bit of like a alizarin crimson or a burnt sienna kind of color. So what the heck? Let's put some alizarin crimson down there. There by the eye, I'm seeing burnt sienna. So I'll pop that down. So let's take a look. On the shadows, it seems to be French ultramarine. So put some of that guy down. And then I'm also seeing some reflections of white. I suppose technically those reflections are sky color, but for all intents and purposes, it's a white. So here's now an interesting thing. When you're doing glazing, by rights, you should be using only transparent colors. Remember we chatted about these blocks in the first lesson? You're only supposed to be using transparent colors when doing glazing. But I found that I can use semi-transparent colors, the one with the diagonal line through it, as well. They work pretty much just as good. So just make sure that all the glazes that you're doing, that you either have transparent or semi-transparent. You can also use opaque colors, the one with a solid block, but just bear in mind that it's going to be solid. You're not going to have as good a transparent effect as what you're going to have. But if you thin it down enough, you will always still be transparent. But only at really thin glazes. Lots and lots of water and oil in the mix. Alright, so let's say we're going to start with this yellow. So what I'll do is I'll take a little bit of that and I'll put it down over here. And now when I'm doing glazing, I've always got my roll of kitchen towel with me. So generally I'll actually tear off a little block at a time, and I'm going to use one block at a time. Just crumple it up, because I'm going to use this constantly to dry off my brush and adjust the amount of glazing that I have on the brush. Right, so we can now dip this inside the water that's got the oil in it and mix it into your paint. Now can you see I haven't mixed it into all the paint, I've just mixed it into a tiny amount, because that there is the color that it's going to lay down with that amount of water in it. If I add more water into the mix, so let's just dry off that, just to get rid of any excess paint that's on the brush. Pick up some more oily water. So can you see what's happening? As I add more of the oiled water mix, I'm getting thinner and thinner amount, or less and less amounts of pigment inside this water mix, and that allows me to do really light glazes, and eventually by adding more and more paint to it, more and more intense glazes. So let's add some more over there. And let's go even more intense, more intense, more intense. So now there's got less and less and less water in it and more solid pigment, until eventually, if you use just lots of paint and no water, you've got pretty much an intense color, and that's how you get variations. Right, so I'm going to just give my brush a quick little wash in the water, because I don't want all that pigment in it. So notice I haven't washed it here in my glazing bottle. This guy here, and that's what's nice with this guy being transparent, you've got that milkiness in there that reminds you that, that's not my brush washing water, this is my glazing water. And you can do the same with all the other colors. And of course you can mix. You can say if you want a green, you can by all means go ahead, add a blue to it, mix them together to form yourself a green glaze. All your normal color mixing rules apply. So now we can go ahead and add the glazes. So obviously, because our paint that we're adding to the canvas is really thin, that paint could run, right? So whenever you're doing glazing, your canvas must be lying flat on the table like it is over here. Alright, so let's do it. So I'm going to pick up some of this really watery glaze of the yellow. I rather start with a too thin and too light glaze. It's easy for me to add more pigment. You can take off, I'm going to show you how, but it's always easier to add more pigment. Okay, so I'm going to add that yellow glaze in this area of the neck over there. Okay, so let me zoom way in so you can see what that brush stroke looks like. Can you see there's barely any color over there? But that's great, because that's now allowed me to judge how much paint that I need. So let's add another layer. And now I want to fade this guy out from here to here. In other words, you must be more intense in this area and less intense down to there. So we'll add more paint in that area, more glazing, and then brush it downwards in the direction that you want it to fade. So what's happening is you've now got more water and more pigment over there, and as you come down here, your brush becomes drier and drier, and eventually you've got less, obviously now less and less color that you're laying down. Okay, let's zoom out again. So can you see at this stage it's still very subtle, very, very subtle, but you can distinctly see it's almost like that there has now given us a corner to make that stand upright. So that's pretty cool. And I also notice that I've gone straight over the black. Because the colors that we're adding now are transparent, they're lying on top of the black, but the black is just so dark that you can barely see the glazing that I've added. But it's there. If you come and look really close, then you'll notice that there is just that little bit of a yellow tinge to that black now. And that's fantastic because that adds even color into our darkest darks. Alright, so I've picked up a little bit more paint now, like this. In other words, I've got more pigment and less water. Okay, let's add it to there. I'll fade him out that way. Now, if I see that there's too much of the glazing on my brush, that's where this little piece of kitchen towel comes in. So all I'm doing is, because this is so watery, I'm just pressing it on you, and look what's happening. It's soaking up all that excess. So now I'm basically back to a clean, dry brush again almost. There's just a tiny amount of yellow on there. So now you can just use that to soften off that last little edge. So for now, I think that yellow is looking quite great. I'm going to leave him as is. So let's move over to the next color. So I'm going to be clever now. I'm going to go from yellow to yellow ochre, and then say to burnt sienna, and then to crimson, and then to blue, so that we have a bit of a progression, so that we don't have to constantly wash our brush in the washing water. That is a natural progression from that. So if I pick up a little bit of that into the yellow ochre, it's not going to matter. Okay, let's dip it into our glazing water. Soak up the excess, because now don't forget you've scooped up paint, so there's extra paint on here, more than what you need. So dry this guy off, dip him back into your glazing water, and now you can adjust him to how intense you want this color. So for the yellow ochre is going to be around the mane, around the ears, that direction. So it starts off really light in this area over here, because here the hairs are actually in shadow. So we'll add an extra glaze over there to get that shadow going. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to gradually add more pigment into this mix as I come down to get this more intense. So it's still a really thin glaze, and what I'm going to do as I come down here, because here I've got more and more intense, can you see that on the photograph? So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to lay the color down first inside the black, and then I'm going to just flick it inwards in that same motion that we were adding the hairs. So can you see what's happening? It's adding us that lovely little color onto the hair without killing all our extra work that we did to create the actual hair effect. I'm adding even more pigment to the mix. So that the next one is even more intense. Wow, just look at those lovely colors that we're starting to get there now. Isn't that great? Let's add even more pigment. Just those last few guys over there. Okay, so can you see how it's going from intense, less intense, because there's more water and here's more pigment. And that's how powerful the glazing technique is. Okay, so now I'm going to just wash my brush, just dipping it in basically in the washing water, drying off any excess. Okay, now can you see what's happened? This guy's pretty much used up now, so I'll throw him away. He's all wet. And I'm going to grab myself a new one. So now I'm going to go all the way back to the watery mix of the yellow ochre, because inside here I do have some bits of color. It's not pure white. So I'm just adding a few little strokes of glazes in there. So you've got some white and some yellow ochre. Okay, let's head over to the ears, because there's also some yellow ochre over there. So you can see it's really intense on the picture. I think I'm going to just tone that down a little bit. The most intense yellow ochre is that ear area. So I'll start here by where it's darkest. Just add a glaze way over all of that. Just a light little glaze over there. And then here it seems to be quite intense. And then if I look carefully, I'm seeing a little bit over there as well. As well as down there. Right. So let's just spread this glaze around. So I've got pretty much enough glaze there for now. So I'm going to dry off the excess so that I'm not adding any new pigment. And I'm just going to spread this around by moving it outwards. In other words, I've got more pigment over here, and then as I move this way like this, there's less and less of the pigment and the water on my brush. So that's automatically giving me a little bit of a shading. Okay, it's a little bit little, so let's intensify that with more pigment. So this more intense pigment I'm adding here in the center bits. Just a few little light taps and things like that. Okay, let's thin that water down. We'll get rid of the excess pigment on my brush. That. And give a very light glaze over there, just with the tiniest amount. Over there I'm seeing a little bit intense again, so let's pick up lots of pigment. And I'm going into the black. Can you see that? Into the black. So even though you can't see it on the camera, in real life you can see it. And that's just adding that color and that depth and that dimension inside that dark black area over there. It seems like we've got some yellow ochre over here, and there's some yellow ochre around that area over there. So we'll start off with a light glaze, and I think that whole nose area could do with a glaze. Just glaze the whole thing. And here I think is going to be a good example where I can show you how to lift up. Okay, so they're gradually adding, so everything there's got a nice little bit of that browny color to it. So now I'm adding more and more pigment into it, because I can see here by the nose it's more intense. Yellow ochre. And there on that top lip, so sort of in that area over there. So I'm going to put that paint down. Let's dry off any excess, so that we're not laying any new pigment down, we're just moving the pigment that's there around. In actual fact, I'm seeing a little bit of that yellow ochre going past that black. Can you see in this area here, a little bit of that yellow going past the black. It's almost like a yellow burnt sienna kind of a color, so maybe when we come back with the burnt sienna, we'll add some of that in there. Okay, let's wash off any excess off this brush again. Just to soften that out there. So the yellow ochre is actually a opaque color. So can you see what's happening? It's actually there, it's covered up the black because it's opaque. But here, where I've got more water in it, I can still see my original shadings shining through. I can see there's a little bit more yellow ochre or a browny color inside that nose area over there. Let's add some there. Here I've added the glaze over that, but at the end of the day that's actually a highlight. So I'm going to wash and dry my brush again, and because I've got a clean dry brush I can just gently wipe over there and it's lifted up. All that glazing that I've put down, it's gone. How cool is that? So by the same token, let's say for example you've put down some glazing over here and you're not happy with that. Then all you do is just take a clean dry cloth and you can instantly dab it and it'll soak up most of that. If it hasn't, then really wash your brush, get it super clean. Just dry off that excess water, but still it must still be quite damp. And then just give it a gentle rub and then dab it. So what you've basically done is you've diluted that paint that is down there. Okay, and let's see, over here there's that little little bump over there, and for some reason it seems to be yellow. So what the heck? So we'll just lay down a little bit of color over there. So here it's quite intense in that area, so I'm adding more pigment in this area here. And then from there it just sort of fades out. So I'm going to wipe off any excess. Comes out that way there. So yeah, I do seem to be seeing also like a little bit of a yellowy, orangey, I think it's almost more of a, yeah, it's more of an orangey color. I'm seeing orangey colors over here. I'm seeing sort of orangey colors over here. So I think that's our cue. Let's use some of this illustrated crimson. We'll make it a bit pinky. Thin down the paint. Get rid of the excess initially. Okay, so there's a light little wash over there. Don't be shy to pick up more water if the color is too intense. Some over there. Yeah, that's really adding some beautiful life, these colors, isn't it? I really like this. Okay, let's stop over there. And now let's go and add some down there by the neck as well, where we see it. So there again, because the neck is round, we can have a bit of a shading here. So it's going to be quite intense right up against the edge. And then as we come out, it's going to fade away, because you've now got less and less pigment on your brush. Very gentle touch. Seems to be just a tiny amount down there. Really thin amount of paint. We don't want to add too much there in that area, because there seems to be quite a bit of blue over there, and there's a bit of blue there for a shadow. Let's take a look. I also seem to be seeing just touches. Of purple over there, just tiny touches in there, in this little shadow area. I think that'll help when we actually add that shadow that's in there, because you can see the ear is actually casting a shadow in that area. Alright, let's wash the brush. Let's go over to that burnt sienna. Let's do the eye. So here we have to be careful, because we've actually already added that sun highlight, that sun spot in the eye. So we can't glaze over that, we've got to glaze around it. So use a fine brush to glaze around that. So add a little bit more pigment. Look how nice alive that eye is now that we're starting to add the color into it. Instantly it looks more alive, eh? I'll just gradually glaze more and more pigment in there until I'm happy. And in actual fact, I think I'm going to glaze more pigment here at the bottom, in other words on the outsides, than in the center. So that's going to give us a bit of basically a shading, lighter brown to darker brown. And there we go. I think we'll leave that guy at that. Seems to have a little bit of brown in this area over there, so let's give him a bit of color there too. So our zebra has got some beautiful color now already. Let's add those shadow blues in. Okay, so now we're going from a brown to a blue. So let's give this guy a decent wash. We basically want our paintbrush spotlessly clean at this stage, because the brown and the blue don't follow on each other. Like these guys here, can you see they all follow nicely on each other? They harmonious colors, but now suddenly the blue is not harmonious, so we need a spotlessly clean brush again. Let's put some of my blue down. Let's thin him out. Okay, so as before, we start with too thin a glaze. They are easy to add more color. Let's start over here. Here, I've got a paint that's, as far as I think, too thin, too much water in it. In other words, not enough pigment. And now I'm going to start off in an area which I think needs way more. And that way, like for example here, it's got a lot more pigment in it than what I thought it did. So instantly, if I put this guy at a place, for example, yeah, maybe over there where it's less intense, or over here where it's less intense than this area over here, I would have had a problem. Now I would have been sitting around trying to lift out paint. And I don't want to do that. Or it's not as easy to do that as it is to add more pigment. So that's why I start with too little pigment on the brush, and I start in a too intense area. And that way I can avoid any oopses, any miscalculations on my part. Alright, so now that I can see there's not too much pigment, I'm going to add some more of my glazing water to it to thin it down even more. Right, so let's take a look. All the way underneath here is dark, and then from here to that little spot over there needs a bit of a glaze. And here, for some reason, I don't know why it's got blue there. I suppose it's just a bit of angle, or maybe it's a bit of color, I don't know. And that glaze over there just seems to gradually fade out. So in other words, this blue glaze of ours, what we're doing is we're actually adding here we added color, and here we're actually adding the dimension and the molding. Okay, I'm going to really get rid of any excess blue now. Super thin, super thin glazes over here. over there it becomes more intense again. So there I can add more pigment there and there. I'm going to put him down quite intense because this is a shadowy area here, just in that little area there. And then from there we soften him out. So now, because you've got a white background, be very careful that you don't go over the line. You stay inside your zebra. Yeah, I think we can get this here a bit more intense now. And down here at the bottom, because this bottom piece here shows the rounding. All that's all now still wet, so you work it away. So there is now a slight possibility that if you've worked hard, or pressed hard with your brush, that you've lifted up a little bit of the black. If that happens to you, just very gently keep working in that area, but super gentle, and then you leave the guy to dry, and then you come back and you just re-establish that. Here we've got that little bit of a, must be a bump or something over there. So we're going to pop that in and fade it out. And then here by the ears, there, quite intense blue over there, and I like that, that looks great. It's got A little bit of intense blue over there. And that sort of just curls around. So we did add a little bit of shading over there, which is great. And then here, all this is now dry already because it was so thin. It's dried on us already. If yours hasn't, then just zap it with a hairdryer. Remember, it's water. And if it doesn't, it's not critical. It's going to go just a tad green, but so what? Right, and then here we've got this area over here. Because this here is casting a shadow in that area there. So we're going to use this blue. And we wash it all over all that yellow ochre and stuff. Look at that beautiful cast shadow there. Wow, isn't that amazing? Okay, let's take a look. We do have a little bit more of a cast shadow running down there as well. So it starts off quite a bit over here, and it gets less and less as we go down over there. And the way you do that is make it broad over here and narrower as we go down over here. Very, very thin. You see that? I'm putting down in like a little bit of a triangle. Super thin layer of paint, but look what it's done. It's just rounded that off just beautifully. Okay, so I'm going to take a super thin layer again with just a tiny amount of paint just on this furthest edge over here. I'm going to add just the lightest little blue glaze. And I'm adding it for exactly the same reason. That's just giving me that little curling away shadow that's happening over there. Alright, so I think that's all that seems to be all the shadows that we need over there. Alrighty. Now, what we're going to do is we're actually going to add some reflections. So we're going to be glazing using white. So now white is not a transparent color. It's opaque. It's one of your most opaque colors. But if we thin it down enough, it will still appear transparent to a degree. So wash your brush, get him spotlessly clean. We don't want any residual other colors left on it. You can also see I've got lots and lots of paint color on the palette. So I'm going to have to wash this entire area here to make sure that there's no paint, there's no color there. So all we want now is white, pure white. Okay, so let's take some of our white, put that down there, put some of our mixing water down. Thin it down a lot, so obviously you can't see it because it's white on white, but it's there, really thin, and I can see it there on my brush. There I can see whether it's mixed in with the water correctly enough or whether it's still pieces of paint, but it seems to be nice and solid. Very thin layer initially, as before. So now what's going to happen is you'll notice that with the sun coming from left to right, there are little places that reflecting the sunlight. So here's a little area there that's reflecting some sunlight. So I'm glazing over some of this, and it's now, because this is now not fully transparent anymore, it is going to start hiding some of the black. Then down here, there's a nice little highlight running along here, in that area there. So we'll start with too little. Then we'll gradually add some more. So now this neck is thin over here and is broad over there. So I'm starting thin over here and I'm going broader towards the back. Alright, so what that's now doing is it's adding us that, you can almost call it a reflection from the sunlight. Okay, let's clean and dry the brush. And it's just, and now all you need to really work is inside the black. So I'm just fading it away because this whole deal here is happening in the black. You can work across everything if you wanted to, doesn't matter. Can you see that reflection already? Okay, let's add more paint, but now just here in the center kind of area. In other words, we're working on that shading so that it's lighter through to darker. And because the white's not transparent, it's gradually covering up the black. Look at that lovely, almost shininess that we have on the zebra now. Okay, and then here, there's a little bit of reflection running down in this area over here as well, like that. So it runs down there, and then it fades that way. So there's the brightest bit over there. And then he fades upwards. So can you see how this little highlight over here that we've added in there has now formed a sort of an angle change. We've got that guy there's flat, this area here is doing this, and then that area there is curving underneath. How cool is that? Just a few little marks, right? So I'm picking up some more white, and it's just here behind the ear. I see there's a little bit of reflected light over there as well. So I'm just going to add that little bit of a reflection in at the back there. And that's enough. We don't want to make this white too bright, otherwise what happens is it looks unnatural. Remember, your zebra isn't really shiny. He's not like a shiny like a, what would you call, so like a plastic ball. He's not made of plastic. He's a zebra made of hair. Okay, let's give the brush a good old wash and let's give this guy just a once over. Let's have a look and see. There's just one place that I see that I could just tidy up a little bit or add a little bit more pigment, and that's over here. We've got, this nose is actually flat in that direction over there. So the way we're going to do it is just add an extra little bit of yellow ochre just in that area over there. So do that and just fade it in. So in other words, you've got light, a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, just like that. Alright, so let's zoom in on one or two places just to really highlight it for you. Okay, so to make this look flat, it's gone lighter, then it's darker, lighter, just a little bit of extra yellow ochre in there. Let's go and take a look at that white that I added behind the ear. Okay, so remember we glazed that blue in over here. So there I just added that little bit of white in there. So what that done is it's given you a bit of reflected light, which is literally on the photograph, but it's also given you a distinct tonal value change between there and there. And what happens then is it's given us distance between the two. And let's go and look at the eye. Okay, so can you see I've totally avoided that white. If you've gone over yours by mistake and it's not lifting out fully, then just wait for all this to dry. And then don't forget, add more oil into your water by using, say, instead of 1 milliliters, now this time you're going to add, say, 2 milliliters with the oil, so that or even just use neat oil, because this will be a last little highlight. So instead of using water to thin down your paint, you use straight oil into the white and then add your little highlight back. So it's a lighter brown there and more intense brown, more pigment over there. And there we have it. There's our final zebra. Well, there we have it. I hope you enjoyed doing the glazing with me. It was awesome fun and it actually went really quick and easy, didn't it? I just love glazing. It's an awesome technique because you can do all your grisaille work and get all the detail right without concentrating on color mixing and stuff like that. And then you come back and you can concentrate on the color mixing and get all the colors perfect. Awesome fun. Alrighty, so please remember, if after this you want to give a second layer of glazing, you've got to leave this layer to dry completely. Then once it's dry, in your next layer you're going to add the same amount of water, but this time you add more oil. So for example, here I used my dropper and I added 1 milliliters of oil into the mix. Next time I'm going to add 2 milliliters of oil into the mix. If I need to do another glaze, I'm going to add 3 milliliters into the mix to keep with that fat over lean rule. You get the picture. Alrighty, so we've got one more lesson in the series, and with this we're going to be painting impasto with a knife. It's going to be fabulous. You're going to love it. So I'll see you then.